There's an annual coding competition at my school where participants try and make a project over 36 hours. It was only my first semester there, but I still wanted to try it. I went in with 3 goals. 1. Make a game. 2. Get free merch. And 3. Get free food. Here's how it went. The afternoon of the event was cold and rainy as I walked to the venue. By the time I made it there, my hoodie, book bag, and socks were soaked. After getting checked in, I got some free merch and grabbed some complimentary dinner before attending the opening ceremony. I met a few other attendees, one of which was a fellow game developer, and we all decided to team up. We all gathered around and started to discuss what kind of game we wanted to make. We had many ideas, but with input from everyone on the team, we ended up choosing a punch-out style game where you play as a knight and use a sword and shield instead of punching and blocking. I was the only one on our team that knew how to use Game Maker, so I started out making the player controls while the rest of them tried to learn GMS2. I ended up finishing the player movement that night and ran to get some free cookies from the gym. The player had 4 inputs: move to the back position, move to the forward position, block, and attack. After a few hours of my teammates struggling to wrap their head around GMS2, everyone just ultimately figured that GMS2 was going to be too much of a hassle to try and learn in time to finish the project. We only had 36 hours, and because of that, we all decided to go our separate ways and just use the hackathon as a learning experience. After the plan crumbled, I went back to my dorm to sleep, but I laid awake thinking about the project. I really liked the idea of the project, and I remembered my goals for the event. Free merch? Check. Free food? Check. Make a game? The next morning, I decided that I was going to keep working on the game solo after talking it over with my former teammates to make sure it was okay with them to continue the game idea. When I got to the venue, I had a banana and some apple juice for breakfast. While I booted up the project, I was there pretty early and most people hadn't shown up yet, so I was able to snag a pretty good seat. Once I finished breakfast, I started working on the enemy behavior. I used a finite state machine almost exactly like the players with a few minor tweaks and made it play without needing any player input. After that, I started working on a visual mock-up of the game. We had originally had planned to use a knight as the main character, but I was really struggling to make a unique and visually pleasing one. It's then that I remembered the old saying, if you're struggling with character design, make it a furry. I ended up basing the character on a mouse, and I had a little fellow that I was pretty happy with. I just realized that I forgot to give him a tail though. The game needs an enemy though, and I designed it based on the natural enemy of mice. Me. Or a cat, I guess. I made him really rotund and I really like how it turned out. When I started animating the sprites, however, I found that the outlines took way too much time to add the animations, so I removed them. In hindsight though, I wish that I kept the outlines because I think they're just much more charming and look a lot better, but oh well. After the animation was done, I imported the assets into the project and implemented health and damage for both the player and the cat before taking a break to grab lunch. The dumplings they served for lunch were really good and solidified to me that the food was one of the highlights of the event. The free food alone was honestly reason enough to attend the event. Throughout the entire event, there were several activities going on at a given time, so I decided to take part in a Scribble.io game that was going on at the time. After my much needed break, I implemented the health bar for the mouse before rushing to another activity because they were giving out free shirts. Immediately after this activity, there was another one with one of the school's therapy dogs, so I had to make sure to see that. Finally, after that long break, I got back to work implementing the cat's health bar and gave it a simple but effective defeat effect. I then made infinite cats. One thing that was missing from the game, which I loved in Punch-Out, was the multiple enemies. I wasn't going to be able to make different attack patterns for them because of the time constraint, but I did spend some time designing some different cats and implemented them into the game, making their attacks more and more difficult. Blocking was entirely useless at this point in development. The plan was to implement an attack that could only be blocked and one that could only be dodged. However, I hadn't implemented the block-only attack yet, so that's what I decided to do next. I decided to make the block-only attack the cat spitting up a hairball because I thought the animation looked really funny and it fit with the cat theming. Speaking of animation though, the area behind the characters was looking really bare, so I went ahead and took another crack at the background. This is what I ended up with, and I thought it was good enough, so I moved on. At the moment, nothing happens when you run out of health, so I had to fix that by adding a death screen. I just edited the mouse sprite by rotating it 90 degrees and put X's over its eyes before putting all the cats surrounding it. At this point, I had been working for a while, and there was a Pokemon Showdown tournament going on at the event, so I decided to drop by and watch it while I did some bug fixing. After that was over, however, I found an empty room and started making sound effects. I meowed, hissed, and coughed up hairballs into my microphone while sleep deprived. And with that, the game was done. I unfortunately had a project due the next day that I was putting off by being here, so I went ahead and did that before I went back to my dorm to get some sleep. I'm going home. It's currently 4 a.m. They stopped serving breakfast at like 8:30. Probably gonna sleep till 7, so 4, So I'll get like 3-ish hours of sleep, which that's enough. Yeah, that's enough. It was the dawn of the final day, and I made it to the expo with 1 hour before submissions closed. It was during this time that I had to make sure the game was fully functional before I submitted it. And it was! I submitted it with 30 minutes to spare. After the hackathon, there was to be an expo where everyone showed off the projects that they worked on. I all of a sudden got really nervous to present my game to the judges. I felt like I nailed the first presentation, but I felt like the second one didn't go nearly as well. I also felt in the beginning that when most people came to play the game, they had like a certain expectation for it, and I disappointed them with it. It felt like they really didn't understand what was going on with the game, and they just really were not enjoying it at all. However, the more people that came, the more they seemed like they were enjoying it, and some people even came to play it more than once. Before the closing ceremony, pasta was served for lunch. After that, we funneled into the auditorium for winners to be announced. They were giving out some really cool prizes, including VR headsets and Nintendo Switches. I designed my project in a way that hopefully met as many criteria as possible, so I had my fingers crossed to win in the first time hacking, best presentation, most unique, most polished, or People's Choice categories. I didn't win any prizes, but there were some really outstanding projects, and I had a fantastic time at the hackathon. I completed all of my goals, and I met some really cool and really skilled people. So I guess we can say that the real prizes were the friends I made along the way. Bye!